Hello, welcome to the Inside the Birds pregame show. I'm Geoff Mosher with Adam Caplan, and of course, we're joined by Greg Cosell, the final pregame show of the season. And of course, Inside the Birds big game coverage is presented by Green Lawn Fertilizing. We've been so excited to have Green Lawn Fertilizing on board to bring you guys all of the Birds coverage leading off to kickoff. Well, this is the final pregame show, and it's a pretty big game. It's called the Super Bowl LIX, the Philadelphia Eagles versus the Kansas City Chiefs. And we're going to break this thing down. And at the end, we're going to do what we do best. We'll give you our final score and game prediction along with Super Bowl MVP. Greg, these two teams, if I'm going to borrow a phrase from a wrestler that Adam knows, I think about excellence of execution. These are two teams that forget what the tape says. I mean, you watch them play, they're crisp, they're clean, and neither of them turn the ball over very much. And yet, both of them got here on producing a high number of turnovers, especially in the playoffs. So I find that to be sort of the fascinating subplot to this game is what happens when two teams that are so excellent in their execution and thrive off the opponent not executing face off against each other.
Well, I know we all thought week 5 during the bye week that the Eagles would be here and we'd be doing a Super Bowl pregame.
100%. 100%.
Yeah.
2-2. Yeah.
It's funny you mentioned that, Geoff, as a starting point. And obviously it's important for every team, and maybe it's just because, we talk about the Eagles every week, on this show with the pregame and not the Chiefs. But the fact that they have not really turned the ball over hardly at all since week 6 after the bye week. How many turnovers have they had since week 6? It's been very few.
Very few.
That's such a huge thing. And, I've given this a lot of thought. We all know, obviously the pass game hasn't put up the numbers that many thought it would, particularly when you have receivers like Smith and Brown and Goddard. And Hurts has had great success in the league at times throwing the football. But a lot of people get upset. Oh, he throws the ball away. He doesn't do this. He doesn't do that. But at the end of the day, the one thing that I kept coming back to is in the team context, I think he really understands the team context extremely well. And he knows that by doing that, if they have to punt, okay. And by the way, one other thing we can surely get into is the fourth down element. It's really important. But if they have to punt and the other team has to go 75, 80, 85 yards with their defense, it all works. It all fits together. So, yes, would everybody, including the Eagles coaching staff, love to see more? Of course they would. That's just the nature of coaches and the nature of how they teach and coach. But in the overall context, Geoff, of how the Eagles play, you can't overstate how important it is that they do not turn the ball over.
Jeff, let me add one thing to that real quick.
Yeah, real quick, Adam, real quick. 7 giveaways since week 4. 7 in
that's incredible. That's incredible. That's a big reason why they're here.
Yeah, it is.
Now, you brought that up, and I want to talk about off of that. So in Radio Row here in New Orleans this week, because one of the great things about being here, you talk to former coaches, current and former players. And it's funny because I always ask, okay, well, who do you like in the game? How do you see it playing out? You got the Mahomes factor, but a lot of people that have a lot of former players have no tie to either team. They think Hurts. They just brought this up. Ironically, about the turnover, maybe his best game as a professional was 2 years ago in this game, right? But they said, he's going to want revenge. He's going to want to get this win. But it doesn't mean you need to be conservative. And Greg, you were talking about this on one of our last shows. This surprised me. You felt, you know what? You felt that they might come out pretty aggressive, correct?
I just have a feeling.
Feeling, sure.
Based on just a gut. And aggressive is a relative term. I don't want to sit here and say, that they're going to come out and just start tossing it all over the yard. But it would not shock me if they came out. Now, granted, let me say this. In the Super Bowl 2 years ago, different offense. I think, Hurts was playing, not Hurts, the passing game was playing at a higher level at that time. I think that's fair to say when you say overall, back then. Although obviously in that NFC Championship game, the game was different because Purdy got hurt. But they had a run to Sanders on the first play of the game in that Super Bowl, and then they threw 6 consecutive passes. Now, again, I'm not a predictor. I'm not going to sit here and say that's what they're going to do, but I just have a gut feeling they're going to be a little aggressive with the pass game and see how it starts. Because the one thing they do know is Hurts does not really put the ball in danger. He's not a risky thrower. So if he doesn't see it, he's either going to throw it away or he'll run. And you know what? Running is not a bad option for him. And to see how the defense responds to that.
Jeff, but I will say this, though. You saw the game, you saw the championship game, right, this year. Hurts threw the ball very well. He was accurate, right? The attempts were up. And we know this has been a low attempt team, partially because of Barkley. And let's not forget Hurts, as Greg's saying, is part of the run game. We saw it in the Pittsburgh game. We saw it in the Cincinnati game. Now, I know Cincinnati, their defense, we could not figure out what Cincinnati was trying to do. They decided not to be aggressive. The first Green Bay game, in fact, a friend of mine who was assigned the Eagles this season said that was by far the most Kellen Moore-centric game. First game of the season. Who knew?
Right.
But he's always capable. We've seen this. Maybe not 2 years ago when it was pyrotechnic, so to speak, because there was a downfield passing offense, but you saw it. And Greg, you've talked about it. When he feels it sometimes, look out.
Yeah.
And sometimes, you know what? He's
willing to do it. One thing, Jeff, too, that probably, now that we're sort of talking about this, their offense is very layered. There's a lot of concepts within their offense. And because of the run game element, I mean, I can go back to multiple plays this year where you had the zone read option. You had the inside zone run action with Barkley. You had the screen game action on the side. There's a lot going on within their offense that puts pressure on a defense and really defines things one way or the other. And it's a difficult offense to play against, even if Hurts, is not necessarily, Joe Burrow in terms of precision passing on a snap after snap basis. But there's a lot there, and there's a lot to defend, and it puts a lot of stress and pressure on defenses with their eye discipline, with their alignments. There's a lot going on with the Eagles offense.
There is, and that's how I really want to start off this pregame show as we get into the X's and O's with the Eagles offense and what it can do and what it might do against a Chiefs defense that is very good, and we'll get into that in 1 second. Speaking of green, guys, though, if you're already stressing about your lawn this spring, our friends at Green Lawn Fertilizing can help. Based right in the Philadelphia area, these guys are the experts in the region's conditions. That includes Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware. They know how tough that drought was last year, and they've created a custom blend and approach that will help your lawn recover. Who's ready to see green lawns again, as opposed to last summer when everybody was looking like they were living in Arizona in the Delaware Valley? We don't want a repeat of that. And Green Lawn Fertilizing is going to make sure that we don't have to suffer through another season like that again. So be sure to sign up now to receive 10% off. And I'm told this is a very limited time offer. So head to the link in the description or greenlawnfertilizing.com/InsideTheBirds to take advantage. Let the Eagles and what happens on Sunday be the only thing you're stressing about this season, and call Green Lawn Fertilizing today. All right, so when we talk about the Eagles offense week after week, Greg, we talk about their, I want to call it, what's the word I'm looking for? And I don't want to say innovative, but their very particular and deliberate use of no huddle.
Yes.
Orchestrated by Jalen Hurts. And I want to know if you think that the no huddle offense that the Eagles use is designed to catch the defense off guard or designed to get the Eagles themselves into a rhythm and then kind of get that ball to Barkley when defense is, when you're in your rhythm and bam, you allow your home run hitter to get that space to hit a home run.
I would say there's a little of both. They predominantly go no huddle on first down, predominantly, not 100%, but predominantly. So they get a first down, they go no huddle, which is for teams that like no huddle, that's very common. But, I think that they're really comfortable doing it. I think you'll see a lot of it in the Super Bowl for this reason, that the Chiefs clearly like to do a lot of movement on defense, and they obviously blitz, and they're not just a third down blitzing team. And when you go no huddle, and this will be a challenge for Spags. Now, he'll have an answer somehow. We don't know how it'll play out, but he'll have an answer. It's not his first rodeo. He's not new at this. But you're trying to make the defense declare, show what they're going to do. It's very hard defensively to do a lot of pre-snap communication and adjustment versus no huddle, because you don't know when the ball is going to be snapped. And the Eagles will have some kind of quick snap deal that, let's say, Hurts all of a sudden sees that the defense, the safeties are moving around and they're not getting quite to their position. I'm sure they'll have a word, Hurts will say blue and the ball gets snapped, whatever it may be. So I think you'll see a good amount of no huddle to see how the Chiefs react to it. And the bottom line is the Eagles have been really, really successful with it. And it's not a matter of creating long, explosive pass plays. It's a matter of sustaining offense. And that leads to another point, if I may. I know, we end up sort of just kind of doing stream of consciousness.
Yep.
They're really a 4-down offense. And I think that can't be overstated either. So if they get to their own 40-yard line, meaning the -40 going in, okay, if it's 4th and 3, maybe even 4th and 4 or less, they could well they go for it. They're a 4-down offense, and that changes the way you play defense. Because now if it's 3rd and 9 and you hold them to 7 yards, they're going for it on 4th and 2. So now, you have to hold them not to 7 yards, but to 3 yards, and that changes everything.
And Jeff, one thing I'll say, talking to other teams that have gone against the Chiefs, and we know the Chiefs are pretty disciplined, right? And Spags does a great job, but if you talk to other teams, they'll tell you, what? Chiefs aren't very good at corner. They just execute really well. Other than McDuffie's phenomenal.
Right.
And it's amazing he's playing outside now. That's surprising. And we'll get into that later in the show. But whether Nas Johnson's out there, why no Watson plays over him, Jalen Watson. But you talk to other people, they go, what? These are just okay corners. They're very beatable. And that's, to me, where you're going to go.
Yeah. To get to the point on the 3rd and 4th down, that really, I think it can be demoralizing.
It is.
Because everybody knows on 3rd down, when you get a 3rd down stop, you see how fired up the defense is. They're charged up. And not just that, but Greg, from a play caller standpoint, 3rd down is when you want to bring your sub package and bring your look and bring your blitz or bring your twist and stunt that the other team might not be ready for. And now you may have to save that for 4th down, or you may not be able to show it on 3rd because you're going to want to do it on 4th, but hey, they may get the 3rd down and then that becomes irrelevant. So being a 4-down offense, as the Eagles are, it stresses everybody from the personnel to the coaching staff on how they're going to call the game.
And that's also, Jeff, and your point's a really good one. That's where the Hurts factor really comes into play. Because if it's 4th and 2 or 3, his legs are a huge factor. I mean, think about all these teams that have quarterback. Think about playing the Bills with Josh Allen. I mean, Hurts is not quite Josh Allen in that regard, but it's very similar in terms of conceptually how you have to play. If it's 4th and 3, Hurts's legs are a big, big deal. So you're right. Everything changes. It's you almost have to have a separate package now for 4th down that when you're playing quote unquote normal conventional offenses, you don't necessarily have to worry about. You've got to have a separate deal that you've got to practice.
Yeah. And Jeff, by the way, and the Eagles might throw it on 4th and 3 to A.J. Brown downfield, where most teams wouldn't do that.
Right.
They trust Jalen and A.J. because, Greg, you've told us this forever. If Jalen sees one-on-one coverage on the outside, that ball's coming out.
And by the way, when it's 4th and 3, 4th and 2, teams are playing man coverage. They're not playing soft zone. So you're going to get man.
There you go.
Yeah. So let's talk about the backbone of the Eagles offense here. It's Saquon Barkley. It has been Saquon Barkley all year. He's the engineer of the offense. And there are times where he's the bailiff for the offense, where the passing's not there and you handle, and the next thing you know, he's like against the Rams. He's taking it to the house. Adam, someone asked me if I thought that Saquon Barkley has to have a huge game for the Eagles to win. And I unequivocally said yes. And I still believe that. I'm not saying the Eagles can't pass the ball, but I just can't see a situation where Saquon Barkley is 13 for 35 and the Eagles win this game. Do you agree?
I agree totally. Yeah, I just can't. I mean, how often have teams really stopped Barkley? The Washington game, because Hurts got hurt, by the way, in the first quarter in Washington. It's just, again, we're here in New Orleans. You talk to players and defensive players, especially. I talked to Malik Jackson, former Eagles defensive tackle. We were talking about the game a little bit. I mentioned Lige Douzable, who's had some great information. I really enjoyed talking to him. You're just worried if you think you're playing really well, that big run's coming. It's kind of like you could Allen Iverson, whoever you want to bring up, NBA player, when you think you've got him, and then he just goes on a route, he goes on a roll. You don't know what's coming, Geoff, as we send it back to you, but it's probably going to come. Now the question would be, Geoff, if you look at Spags' defense, we know that against the run they're really good. Well, is it so much because okay, they're good, but look at their schedule? Have they got Barkley's on another island? But how good have the running backs been? I know they played Joe Mixon, who's had a good year, but maybe it's not the greatest list in the world if you really go game by game.
Well, can I just jump in here, Geoff?
Sure.
Please do.
And I think and we'll get to the other side of the ball, but that's where the Eagles defense comes into play too, because Barkley's not going to have 13 carries. I mean, unless this is a wacko game with weird turnovers and all that. But I mean, the Eagles are never. There were only 2 or 3 games. Even the Commanders game in the NFC Championship game, they were not ahead by 3 touchdowns in the middle of the third quarter. That game, they pulled away late. They're not usually ahead by a lot going into fourth quarter. So the games are close. Their defense keeps every game close. And then Barkley, as we know, had more second half carries and more second half yards than any back in the league. So, barring anything ridiculously unforeseen that no one could possibly predict, he's never going to have 13 carries. You know what I mean? So, again, I'm not saying that means he's going to run for 180 yards, but he's going to have 20 plus, in that range, and maybe even, depending on the game, 27 or 28 carries.
And Geoff, by the way, the point differential for the Chiefs, they play tight games. They rarely blow teams out. That's another factor. When you look at point differential, which I know a lot of people in the gaming industry look at that, determining over-unders maybe, or what the point spread might be. This is why the point spread this week has been so tight, because they see this as a very even matchup.
Yep.
So I think one of the biggest matchup advantages the Eagles might have, and Adam alluded to this, is against the Chiefs' corners. Specifically, Devontae Smith is probably going to have a favorable matchup. Whoever lines up across, unless it's McDuffie. If it's their number 2 corner, if it's in the slot, it's a huge advantage. But Greg, I think what Spags does well that I'd like you to speak to is making sure that quarterback doesn't really get to that second or third read quite often, because he's able to bring pressure on you or make it so that it's very difficult to get to that level.
And there'll be some double teaming situationally, because I think back to when they played Houston, they doubled Nico Collins on occasion. And again, not on 20 plays, but that's all situational. They could double AJ Brown. We'll see how it plays out. But he's been known to do that. That's not something that would be out of the ordinary. And when I say double, it's more bracket. It's
bracket, right?
It's but Adam made a really good point. The corner opposite McDuffie, they seem to have started Johnson. Now it's the Super Bowl with 2 weeks. Maybe it's all Watson, because they obviously believe he's the better player, because even when they were starting Johnson, he was playing, 15, 16 snaps, and Watson was playing the large majority. So maybe Johnson's not even playing in this game. We don't know that. But the point is, Adam's right. The corner opposite McDuffie is someone you might look to attack in this game. And the one thing about Spags is he will play press, which again doesn't mean it's 100%, but he will play press, and you do get some opportunities.
Another thing that jumped out to me about the Eagles offense in this game specifically, and I was rewatching the Super Bowl from 2 years ago, and I thought to myself, just rewatching it, wow, Dallas Goedert actually had some really big catches in that game. And Jalen Hurts, and we know 2 years ago, Jalen Hurts was maybe just feeling it a little bit more and letting it rip a little bit more than he is now. But he threaded some windows.
He made some big
at times.
Yeah,
he did. And it wasn't just AJ Brown. I mean, he really hit Goddard on some key third downs in that game. And it just reinforced to me something that Adam has said all year. You, Greg, we've talked about it. This passing game, this RPO game, especially if they can incorporate that into the offense, there's room for Dallas Goedert to be the guy that the passing game goes through. He doesn't have to have the most catches or yards, but he can give you the most impactful plays early to set it up for everybody else, Greg.
Yeah, no question. I mean, Goddard, as we've discussed many times, I mean, he's, just in terms of talent, he's probably a top 5 tight end in the league. The way the Eagles played offense this year, he certainly didn't get the target share, so it's not, he's not catching 90 balls. But yeah, he's a really good player. And the one thing that they do really, really well, and it's simple throws, is they get him the ball with run after catch space.
And just going to bring that up.
And you know what? Those plays, even if it's 11 yards, those are big plays, and because they're very much a sustaining. It's very hard to play the Eagles when they stay on schedule, and that's really what their offense is. When they get to 2nd and 5, and then it's 3rd and 3, and then it's 4th and 1. I mean, they're a really difficult offense to defend. So Goddard is really, how many times have we seen off that run action? It's a form of RPO where they just kind of hit Goddard kind of in the flat, and he gets 12 yards. And it doesn't seem like, oh my God, what a big play, but it is a big play.
Sure.
And the physical nature.
Zone, yeah, I was gonna say the red zone when they do the zone read with the RPO tag that we showed on what they've run that several times this year with success.
Yeah, I mean it's just they're just a hard offense to defend with all the layers that they bring, and so much of it starts with Hurts as a runner and obviously the Barkley run game.
Geoff, I want to say this one with Goddard. His physicality, okay? We've seen this since he's come back from his last injury. He looks different. I don't know. I'm not sure quite what it is. Maybe it's the competition. Maybe it's the time of year that he knows he's got to bring it. He's bringing something else, man. In that open field, Greg's alluding to it. The run after catch element, the physicality that he brings, and it's got to be demoralizing to defenses because they're not stopping at that initial contact at 6 yards. He's dragging these guys downfield, and coaches absolutely love that.
I think the Eagles are the most physical team I've seen all year, and though it starts with the offensive line, it's been infectious. We've seen Barkley run with much more power, and I think A.J. Brown and Dallas Goedert bring a physicality to catching the ball and making yards after contact that when you combine that with the offensive line and the running game and the quarterback, who I can't shortchange, he plays the game about as physically as any quarterback when he puts his head down and wants to run or the tush push, right? I mean, they assert themselves. They dominate teams because they are usually more physical than their opponent. And I really think that shows up in the fourth quarter. Teams get tired, and lately you've seen them lose handle of the ball, lose grip of the ball, because the Eagles are just asserting themselves both offensively and defensively.
I would agree with that. I mean, but, it'll be interesting to see defensively what Spags does with his fronts. Because I think, again, fronts are an interesting thing. We all assume, you just line up, you play your fronts. But, you can do a lot of things with fronts that force an offensive line to block a little bit differently. And that's one thing that I'll be curious about to see what he does, because sometimes he plays in a 5-man front. It's not 5D linemen, but they bring a linebacker up on the ball. Tranquill sometimes will do that. If Chenault's in the game, he will do that. And then what happens is, and Adam can speak about this. I know he spoke to someone who talked about this, but you can reduce your front, inside. I mean, there's a lot of things you can do if you feel they can be effective. But he's not just going to consistently line up in the same front. That's not going to happen.
Geoff, Leger Douzable, the former defensive tackle for the Jets and Giants, told me, he goes, when he watched the Texans take, because he was looking to he wanted to get a good sense because he's got to do all these shows here in New Orleans. Matchup wise, what could Spags do to stop Barkley? Or not stop, but you're not going to stop, but slow him down.
Right.
And he said, look, in the Houston game, and I thought he said it was early in the game. And Greg, you might have seen this. They moved Leo Chanel to inside a tackle.
Yeah.
And they moved Dana.
He's kind of a wild card. Yeah.
Yeah. And he said, man, that was really good. They didn't do it for very long, but the Texans had not seen that on tape, and they could not run the ball for a short period of time. So on Greg's point, you are who you are, but you've got to, when you're playing one of the best seasons of all time at running back, it starts with the run game. And Greg also mentioned the Hurts factor. Sure, that's a factor, but you want to crush Barkley as much as you can. You can't let him keep getting big run. So we're fascinated to see what Spags is going to have here.
And to raise another point, since we're talking about the Barkley run game, Geoff, the Eagles have really been effective using motion in the run game. People think about motion in the pass game. Oh, man, zone indicator, this, that, change of coverage, change of passing strength. But it's a big deal in the run game as well. And you want to see how the defense is going to react. Are they going to make adjustments? Are they going to change their run support? Because that gives a quarterback, especially in no huddle too, that gives a quarterback a sense of, okay, where's the strength of the run defense? Where's the weakness of the run defense? And Hurts has been very, very good at that, in recognizing that. I mean, you can just simply go back to the first play against the Commanders, just as an example, where they put Devonta Smith in motion and Lattimore ran across the formation with him. And all they had is outside run support players to the field were two defensive backs, and they pulled Goddard and Mailata. So you had Goddard and Mailata blocking two defensive backs. And then, so that's the kind of thing in the run game, Jeff, that is so critical. So motion, which they've started to use really, really effectively in the run game, I think you're going to see that in the Super Bowl.
So, Greg, I want to ask you one question off of this. So, in the Washington game, the Eagles typically in the first half did not throw the ball very much. They put it up 18 times. Okay, yeah. Hurts threw the ball 18 times, which is a lot. But in the second half they didn't have to because they were killing Washington. Go into the fourth quarter, so it was just a run game. You see them coming out aggressive throwing it?
I wouldn't be surprised. Again, no inside information. Just my sense that because they know they're going to get a lot of man-to-man on the outside. And so they know that the reads are going to be, hey, it's cat coverage. Chiefs play, you got that cat. They know it's defined for Jalen. And I think they're going to test it. I think they're going to see how it plays out. And look, we know that Jalen, for the most part, does not make risky throws. If he feels it's not there, he's not going to throw it. Absolutely. And by the way, if he ends up running, or even if he throws an incompletion and, runs right and throws it out of bounds, you know what? He's not turning it over. They live with that.
All right, let's flip the script. We'll talk about this Eagles defense against the Chiefs offense. I have a really fascinating stat about the Chiefs offense that goes back to my original point. Before we get into that, this ain't the little itty-bitty, teeny-tiny bowl. This is Super Bowl LIX. Get in on the action at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of Super Bowl 59. Scoring touchdowns is key to hoisting the Vince Lombardi Trophy, and you have a shot to score big by betting on them at DraftKings Sportsbook, the #1 place to bet touchdowns. New DraftKings customers can bet $5 to get $200 in bonus bets instantly. So download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code BIRDSPREGAME. That's one word, code BIRDSPREGAME, for new customers to get $200 in bonus bets instantly when you bet just $5 only on DraftKings Sportsbook. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 888-78-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help's available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly on behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort. 21 plus age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. New customers only. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, see dkng.co/audio. So the interesting stat about the Chiefs, and we alluded to this in the opening segment, they had 12 turnovers in their first 8 games, meaning giveaway turnovers. They were among the worst at being ball secure, and they had a -4 turnover ratio through 8 games. Well, guess what? In their final 9 regular season games, 2 giveaways, and they both came in the same game. So that means 8 of their last 9 games, they had zilch turnovers. And then in the playoffs, I believe they've only turned the ball over
they did
one time.
So one time, yeah.
Right, one time. That was it. So again, good versus good here. Greg, when you start with the Eagles defense, we always have the question of, do they want to be more one high or more two high? Do they want to play more man or they want to play more zone? But I think in this case, what really is sort of percolating in my head was, do they want to try to figure out a way to get some one-on-ones up front so that someone like Milton Williams or Jalen Carter isn't double-teamed a lot of the times, and can they do that?
Yeah, and that's a great question, because I think that gets to some really interesting matchups up front, and that's where you got to start. People know that Joe Thuney became their left tackle probably with 2 or 3 or 4 games left in the regular season, and they moved Mike Caliendo, essentially a backup, to be their left guard. Thuney's done yeoman's work. Now, there have been games where he's been beaten one-on-one. He's not a tackle. There have been, third down plays and long yardage plays where they've helped him, with chips, with formations, with double teams. I mean, he's not a tackle. But I think the larger issue now, or the second part of that equation, is the Eagles' defensive front versus that O-line. We know that Jalen Carter, arguably the best D tackle in the NFL right now, 98% of the time lines up as the left defensive tackle. That means that he's going to be going up against Trey Smith, the right guard for the Chiefs, who's arguably the best right guard in the NFL. So we've seen over and over and over that teams slide the offensive center, in this case, the Chiefs, Creed Humphrey, a very good player unto himself, would slide to Carter to help the right guard. So the question is, will they do that? It's Trey Smith, because what that's done is it's very often left Milton Williams one-on-one with the left guard. And now it's Caliendo who is the weak link in that defensive front. And Williams has had an unbelievably good season. So will they do that with Carter, or will they feel that Trey Smith can block Carter? And if so, hey, they could be helping Caliendo, which changes the whole equation of the Eagles' defensive front.
Greg, what have the Chiefs done? I mean, you and Chiefs opponents are the only ones who watch as much Chiefs tape. So how have they been able to mitigate the damage playing Caliendo at left guard and Joe Thuney at left tackle?
Well, I think they mitigate it in multiple ways. They mitigate it because their pass game has evolved into being much more of a quick rhythm pass game. There's not a ton of deep drops. And when there are deeper drops, you always have the Mahomes movement factor. He's got a great feel for spatial awareness, maybe the best in the league of any quarterback. And he understands his offensive line. I remember having these conversations. Adam may remember this, how Ron Jaworski always used to talk about the fact that you've got to understand your O-line and know where pressure could be coming from based on, who the players are and how you're going to block it. I remember him telling stories about Stan Walters, the great left tackle for the Eagles, and then Dick Vermeil on a Saturday night would just talk to Jaws and say, hey, Jaws, Stan might have a little trouble with whoever they were playing, if it's a great pass rusher. So when we go, call our 3rd and 9 plays or whatever it is, you've got to be aware that the pressure might be a little quicker. So Mahomes just has a great feel for that kind of thing, and he can mitigate against really severe, problems if they are severe. So they can handle that. Mahomes normally doesn't get sacked much. So go ahead, Adam.
I was just gonna say, I remember you telling me. No, actually, it was Jaws and you. We would, when you guys were helping me out learning the quarterback position, Jaws would always jump in and he goes, "You know what, man? The worst feeling is when I cannot step into a throw.
Right.
When you put pressure up the middle, it is literally the worst as a quarterback." I just remember him being so angered by it. I don't know if he brought any players up, D tackles up that he went against. We know about LT as a pass rusher, but we're talking about interior pass rushers. So Jeff, as Greg just described all this, that to me is that Mike Caliendo at left guard. We're assuming they're going to go. All indications are they're going to stick with this. And Greg has outlined through a number of weeks. Thuney's been okay, been great, but he's held his own. But it's still an advantage for the Eagles.
It is.
And Greg, you've talked about most likely they're going to keep Carter where he is. Because this is he's at that one position.
Now Carter did play 6 snaps at right defensive tackle against the Commanders, the most snaps at defensive tackle in a game he's played all season. Now, it's not like that's 20 snaps, it was 6.
No, and all of that, like they never have done it, which is interesting.
So, could they line him up at right defensive tackle more in this game? That's something to look for. We don't know the answer.
Okay. Fair enough.
Yeah, fair enough. Could they do it? They sure could.
But and Jeff, it's funny as we send it back to you, because we were talking about the Commanders game, the issues that the Commanders had on the interior of their offensive line. And that showed up. Because remember, Trent Scott had to start on the offensive line, and that was a problem. He left and came back. But they had protection issues. They had issues in the offensive line. So this is certainly, if you want to talk about matchups for the game, this is the top 2 matchup that the Chiefs simply have to hold their own. Winning is one thing, but just don't hurt your quarterback.
I mean, I remember watching them against Houston. They played Houston twice with Thuney at left tackle. And there were snaps one-on-one where he clearly struggled with Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson. I think Hunter had the highest win rate percentage of any defensive end in the league, and I think Anderson was 3rd or 4th. So those are big-time pass rushers. Now, Sweat can be a big-time pass rusher. Nolan Smith has improved significantly, but I wouldn't put him in the category of Anderson or Hunter, but he's improved dramatically over the course of this season. So there will be snaps where Thuney struggles. The question is, will those snaps impact the game? That's the bigger question.
Yeah.
I'm interested to see if Vic Fangio, especially if the Eagles get up a little bit, maybe by a touchdown, if he wants to get that double team, say the double team does come, on that side to Milton Williams. If he wants to free up Milton Williams, send one blitzer up the A gap and force the Chiefs to go 5-on-5, because you have to in that situation, or else you're going to leave somebody free.
And what Vic
unless
does,
you keep someone in.
What Vic does more than 5-man pressures is sim pressures. And
right.
One of the things he's phenomenal with his sim pressures, because one of the keys that's never talked about, guys, with sim pressures is what your defensive front looks like. Because what you want when you go with a sim pressure is you want your defensive front to make sure that the offensive line has to block that defensive front, so that a back has to block the second level rusher. Now, he's only the fourth rusher, but and Vic's really good at that, making sure that the back ends up having to block that guy. So that means the back can't release into a route.
Right. And then, you know what? Oren Brooks could be that guy. It's been Nakobe. It was Nakobe Dean. It was Cooper DeJean. At times it was Zach Vaughn. But if there's a concern from Vic's part about Oren Burks holding up in a zone cover, well, why not use him as your sim pressure or extra rusher and see if you can't get Patrick Mahomes to move off his mark and then not be able to see Travis Kelce right there in the middle.
And the other point is, and we went back in our matchup room and looked at a number of the games when Vic was with the Broncos. He played Mahomes 6 times. He didn't really spy. But now we have 2 weeks, and it's different. You mentioned Oren Burks. I wonder if that could happen, and that would be, obviously it's not going to happen 12 times, but, situations, because Burks is 6'3", 230 plus, terrific athlete, was a safety in college at times. He'd be the logical guy to do that. Could we see it? It wouldn't surprise me.
Jeff,
Adam, I know you have go ahead.
I'm just going to add this. One thing you might see, we'll see what happens, because Worthy could be a gadget player. We know Burks, Greg has told us the last couple games he played really well.
Yeah, he's played.
I still think that Matt Nagy and Andy Reid are going to get him. They're going to test Burks because he's rangy, he's long. I don't know if his lateral movement is going to be as good as you would like. That's something that you could see in this game. I'm just telling you, Worthy is an X factor. He's Xavier Worthy, and he's going to be an X factor.
And they're a heavy emotion team as well, Jeff. So you're going to see the Eagles are going to have to deal with that too.
So we saw what happened in the Super Bowl 2 years ago. I hate to bring it up, but you remember.
Adam, I know you have some concerns about how Darius Slay might hold up if the Chiefs are indeed able to take 2 or 3 shots down the field.
I know. Okay, so this is just, and I don't want to take credit for this who the hell knows if it's going to happen? But this is come from other teams who've gone against the Eagles. Jeff, as you and I exchanged notes 2 years ago, how many times did we hear about, we're going to go after Bradbury this week? They would tell us after the game. The club would say, we wanted to, we couldn't protect. Well, the thing here is, when you look at Darius Slay, I know he's really slow start to the season. He's rebounded well. He's still the oldest starting corner on the outside in the National Football League out of 64 starting outside corners, Jeff. He's 34 years old. That's unheard of. He just turned 34 in January. If they can protect, and I know we've talked about this, the Chiefs are not throwing the ball deep. This is the time to do it. Hollywood Brown's healthy. So's Worthy. This is something they could do.
Chiefs are going to take a shot deep in this game.
Got to.
Yeah. Whether it works or not, that it remains
right.
But they're going to take,
And Slay will be that guy. Yeah.
Do they move Worthy around, Greg, enough to be able to get him?
Yeah. They move people all over. That's part of Andy Reid's offense.
That's what I figured they did. Right. I think if there's one concern that you'll have defensively, and otherwise the Eagles' defense is very sound, but low red zone has been an area where they've been exposed at times this year. And again, that's tough anyway, because you're talking about inside the 5, and there's a lot of good offenses.
Well, and don't forget, the Chiefs do get there a lot. But, I mean, the Chiefs have evolved this season into really being a third down conversion offense. They're phenomenal at it. And a red zone offense. They've gotten better as the season's progressed. They weren't very good early. They've gotten better. Right. That's really their bread and butter. They convert on third down, and they score in the red zone. And that's critical.
Is there an X factor on this Chief? I was joking the other night, Greg, that like Marquise Brown, I kind of dozed off and woke up to like Marquise Brown was like accepting the Super Bowl MVP trophy. I don't know, but he is someone though that strikes me as an X factor, because he's been, he's a good player. First of all, he's got 2 weeks to prepare and get even more ingratiated into the offense. He's been used a little bit more, and he's a guy who can hurt you.
Yeah, I mean, look, their offense doesn't, we haven't even mentioned DeAndre Hopkins, who seems like he's not a non-factor. The other guy who seems to come up in these games, and he's not going to go 8 for 120, but Justin Watson always seems, when you get to the playoffs, it seems like he makes a couple of big catches. Yeah, I mean, they've got a lot of bodies at wide receiver. It's just they haven't really been that explosive pass game, so no one's really put up the kind of numbers at the receiver position, the wide receiver position, that you associate with a team in the Super Bowl. That's the thing. But they've got a lot of guys, and like I said, Justin Watson seems, even going back 3-4 years, doesn't it seem like he always makes some big catches in these playoffs?
Jeff, yes, and so does Juju, by the way. Every once in a while, Juju comes up with a catch where you're not expecting it.
I mean, look at all these receivers they have,
Yeah.
But Justin Watson, I mean, he's been their designated shot play guy. Out of the University of Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
Well, that's where shot play guys come from, Adam. Don't sound
exactly. Right. Maybe in the college hoops, if you're old enough to remember the 79 team that went to the Final Four out of Penn. But anyway,
yeah, that lost to Michigan State and
they got clobbered, yes, by Magic's team. Yep, that's right.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, it's going to be a really fascinating matchup. I think we all expect a close game.
Yep.
And I'm excited for it. So we've really wrapped it up as well as we could. We summarized it as well as we could. It's time to do what we do best, and that is make our final prediction of the year for both the score and the player of the game. Greg, I know you've put so much thought into this.
I'm already on record.
Probably has.
I'm already on record, so I'm picking. Right. I'm picking what I picked because I'm on record. Because it's Sunday morning, so I've had to do this all week. So
it is written.
Yeah, it's etched in stone. I picked the Eagles. I feel like the game's going to be a little higher scoring than some might think. So I picked the Eagles 31-27.
Ooh, okay.
Wow, interesting. Okay.
And believe it or not, I think Jalen Hurts is going to have a big game. Now, but having said that, I don't mean he's going to throw for 450 and 5 touchdowns. But I think he's going to be the deciding factor in the Eagles' offense, believe it or not, taking nothing away from Barkley. Hey, Barkley could run for 160. But I think Jalen Hurts will be my player of the game.
Adam?
Well, I'll tell you, all week I've talked to sometimes it's too much information. You've got people.
I know.
From the Senior Bowl, Jeff and Greg last week, and when Jeff and I were there, I was getting opinions from people who've gone to get the coaches or front office people who went against the Eagles, want to know what they thought, and obviously the Chiefs as well. Then this week, it's former players, current players. They're not in the playoffs. I want to get Mike Smith, though, the former I wanted to get Mike Smith earlier this week. I saw him, former Falcons head coach, but I didn't get to him.
Oh, yeah. No, Mike.
We got him on Radio Row. It was nice.
Okay. He's great. Yeah, good guy, and he's got great opinions. But I've got enough opinions. I'm kind of feeling the way I felt earlier in the week, but I have heard enough from both sides to see some stuff and hear some stuff that maybe I hadn't thought of. But to summarize it all, I've got it. Chiefs 24, Eagles 27.
You
knew that was coming. You know that was coming.
I think everybody knew it was coming this time, Adam. Yeah, we're on to you.
I know. Now, player of the game, it hurts to me was the layup because I'm with Greg. He's going to feel it in this game. And I know the Eagles they're low passing total team. And the Chiefs passing game has been kind of dry. It's not great. It's very short, a little bit of run after the catch. But I do think that the ball's going to move a little bit, but someone's going to make a big play. No, it's not going to be BG. It's going to be Milton Williams, number 93. Our guy would, I just feel like this is he continues to play well every game. The guy, he's not on the national map. Most of the national media doesn't know who the hell he is, number 93, but you're going to know about him in this game. And now, going by what Greg's told us, they typically, Eagles, other than the last game, where they did give Jalen Carter a little bit of movement to play the other tackle spot. Let's assume it's going to be mostly Milton Williams getting Caliendo. That ain't going to last very long for Mike Caliendo. Milton Williams is going to be my player of the game.
All right. I love it when you pick a defensive player as player of the game. That's one of my favorite things. Milton Williams is great, and I can see it. I'm not going to overthink this thing, even though I've tried. The one reason I struggle to see a higher scoring game is because I think that both of these teams are just ball control, meticulous, deliberate type teams, and I don't think we're going to see a whole lot of explosives. So
and you might be right. I thought that too, but
in a weird way. I think they're going to complete a high percentage of their passes. I think they're going to both move the ball really well, but not have a zillion possessions because they're both going to secure the ball as well. So it'll come down to the fourth quarter. That is where the Chiefs historically do their damage. But I'm picking the Eagles to win 26-20. And I believe that the player of the game will be the person who scores the game-winning touchdown or go-ahead touchdown. It's going to be A.J. Brown. I'm giving him player of the game.
Little man coverage on the outside. What do you think?
All right.
A little bit. Might have the one explosive pass play of the game. It might go to A.J. Brown.
He did 45-yarder 2 years ago. So
what was fascinating, just as a point, he's not there anymore, but week 11 last year, they met L'Jarius Sneed on Brown the entire game, and Brown had 1 for 8. It was really interesting. That was week 11 last year.
Yep, that's right. Nice. All right, that's going to do it for the final Inside the Birds pregame show of the year. And, well, we're going to have a postgame show, and we're going to wrap it up. And I look forward to doing that with Adam and Andrew DeCecco after the game. So that'll do it for Inside the Birds pregame show. For Greg Cosell and Adam Caplan, I'm Geoff Mosher. Enjoy the game, everybody.